Disclaimer to our viewers. What you are about to watch is a true crime story. This story contains content some viewers may find disturbing. Viewers' discretion is strongly advised.
Security camera video actually shows Molly walking across the parking lot and coming into the building.
Did you believe her to be a coworker of your dad's?
No, I thought she was just a friend.
Did you know about his relationship with Molly?
No.
When was the first time you found out about that relationship?
April 28th, 2018.
So the night the police were at your house into the early morning hours, did you ever wake up?
No, I didn't. I was asleep the entire way.
Okay. So you found out the next morning when you got out of bed?
Yes.
There is a particular kind of darkness in the Missouri countryside on an April night. Streetlights, no neighbors, just gravel roads cutting through thick tree lines, and the sound of a creek somewhere close by, rushing over rocks in the black. Glenn McSparren knew that road well. He'd driven it 100 times between his house and his mother's. He was on it again that Friday night, April 27, 2018, when his headlights landed on something he wasn't supposed to see. A car sitting off to the side, and in front of it, on the ground, a woman, not moving, not breathing, gone. His heart stopped. He already knew before he even got out of the truck. I looked in her eyes, he would later say, and I could tell she was gone. Her name was Molly Watson. She was 35 years old. She had a wedding dress hanging in her closet. Actually, two of them, because she couldn't decide between the two. She had a venue booked, a florist, a hair and makeup team, a centerpiece order, and a marriage license that had been signed just 2 days before. The wedding was supposed to happen on Sunday. Instead, there was a funeral, and when investigators began to pull back the curtain on the man who had put that ring on her finger, what they found was not a grieving fiancé. What they found was something far more chilling. A man with an entire second life, a 23-year marriage, 2 children, and a motive that the people who knew him said made perfect, terrible sense. Glenn McSparren had actually driven that road twice that night. The first time, he had his daughter with him. He'd noticed 2 cars parked on the gravel near the creek, which was a little odd, but not alarming. He saw a short, older-looking man standing nearby. He slowed down and asked him if the car was stuck. The man said, "I don't know where they're at. It's going to be a while." McSparren found that strange. Something about the answer felt off. He dropped his daughter at his mother's house and drove back through, and that's when his headlights swept over the woman lying in the road. He called 911 immediately. The operator told him to check for a pulse. He already knew it was too late, but he went to her anyway. He knelt down beside her. He looked at her face, at her eyes, and he knew. Monroe County Sheriff's deputies arrived and confirmed what McSparren already feared. Molly Watson had been shot once, at close range, in the back of the head. A single bullet, a clean, deliberate execution. Investigators ruled out robbery almost immediately. The ring alone would have told a thief to stop. Nothing had been taken. This wasn't random. This wasn't a stranger. Somebody had brought Molly Watson out to that dark road in Monroe County, pressed a gun to the back of her head, and pulled the trigger. And that somebody, detectives were about to discover, had wanted her dead for a very specific reason. People who knew Molly Watson described her as someone who was completely and fully alive. She sang. She made costumes by hand, elaborate, detailed things she was proud of. She posted video diaries on YouTube, talking to the camera like she was talking to a friend. She was warm, loud, enthusiastic, the kind of person who made a room feel different just by being in it. Life had not always been easy for her. Her first marriage had ended in divorce. During the breakup, she found out she was pregnant. She carried that weight alone for a while. Then she reconnected with someone from her past, Amber Brady, a childhood friend. The two of them had been each other's first everything, really, a long time ago. Now, as adults going through their own difficult seasons, something clicked between them again. Brady described it plainly. She was actually my first girlfriend. I was hers. She was married at the time. I was too, but things weren't going well for either one of us. I think we could talk. We could communicate. We liked doing a lot of the same things. It just seemed to click. Molly and Amber lived together for roughly 5 years. It was a real relationship, complicated, tender, and built on genuine connection. But Molly was always someone who fell hard and fast, and when she fell for James Addy, she fell completely. The two met at the Moberly Area Correctional Center in Moberly, Missouri, where Molly had recently started working. Addy was a corrections officer there, a few years older, quiet, steady. Molly was drawn to him immediately. Amber Brady found out about the affair in the bluntest possible way. She drove to a motel she had suspected and knocked on the door. Molly answered. James Addy was inside, getting dressed to leave. That was the end of Amber and Molly. She had blocked me on everything, Brady said later. That was fine. I mean, it wasn't a good breakup. Molly had moved on. And as far as she was concerned, the chapter with Amber was closed. James Addy was her future. She was certain of it. James Addy was, by almost every description, a difficult man to read. He was quiet in a way that could be mistaken for calm, but was actually closer to concealment. He didn't volunteer information. He didn't make small talk easily. He watched more than he spoke. And when someone asked him something he didn't want to answer, he had a way of making the question itself feel inappropriate. What almost nobody in Molly Watson's world knew, and what Molly herself apparently did not know for the first 7 years she was with him, was that James Addy had never been single a day in his life since his early 20s. He had been married 4 times, and at the time he met Molly Watson, at the time he started dating her, at the time he proposed to her, and at the time he began planning a wedding with her, he was still married. Her name was Melanie Addy. They had been together for 23 years. They had 2 children, a daughter named Emma and a son named Ben. Melanie worked as a teacher's assistant. James came home every weekday, usually a couple of hours later than he should have, which caused arguments that he refused to explain. She assumed he was just private. Some men are like that. He seemed the same all the time. He would get off work at 3 and usually get home at 5, and I would say, "Why are you always so late?" And that would be an argument. He didn't want to tell me anything. The 2 extra hours, it turned out, were for Molly. For 7 years, James Addy maintained 2 complete, separate lives running in parallel. He had a wife, a home, and children in one part of his world. He had a girlfriend, then a fiancée in another. He told each woman what she needed to hear to stay in place. He told Molly that Melanie was his ex-wife, that she had been in a terrible car accident, that she had been placed on life support, and that she had eventually died. He even used this fabricated tragedy as an excuse to miss wedding planning meetings. He told their planner, Sam Cohen, that he had to deal with funeral arrangements for his late ex-wife. The lie was so complete, so layered, that it had its own supporting details: a death, a funeral, an aftermath. James Addy had built an entire fictional biography for a woman who was, at that very moment, very much alive, teaching children and waiting for her husband to come home. He took Molly to Florida. He told Melanie it was a work trip. He took Molly to Mexico. He told Melanie he was going with friends. Melanie said that seemed believable enough, because she never really knew his work friends anyway. Addy had been married 4 times before Molly Watson. His marriage to Melanie Addy lasted 23 years. He was still legally married to Melanie when he proposed to Molly. He told Molly that Melanie had died in a car accident and been removed from life support. Melanie was alive the entire time. "I guess because I wasn't supposed to see it," Melanie said, when asked how she missed the signs. The photos of James and Molly at Disney World were found later, hidden in a loft above the garage, tucked away where no one would stumble onto them by accident. The man had been careful. For 7 years he had been very, very careful, but something changed in 2018, and it changed fast. When James Addy proposed to Molly Watson, everything she had ever hoped for seemed to finally be coming true. She was absolutely, completely in love with him. Her brother Tim said so bluntly. She was absolutely 100% in love with James. She had been with him for 7 years. She knew his rhythms, his silences, his moods. She had waited patiently through all of it. Now, finally, a wedding. The venue was booked. Invitations went out. The theme was Disney's Beauty and the Beast. Burgundy and gold, lush and romantic, the kind of wedding that feels like a fairy tale. Their wedding planner, Sam Cohen, remembered it as beautifully conceived. From Molly's perspective, it was going to be a beautiful wedding and the best day ever. Sam Cohen, wedding planner Molly, had even bought 2 wedding dresses, because she loved them both and couldn't let either one go. Her cousin Jody Lindbergh laughed, remembering that detail. It was so completely Molly, so unable to let go of something beautiful. But James Addy's behavior during the planning process was odd enough that people noticed. Cohen described him as the opposite of Molly. Quiet, flat, no excitement. She chalked it up to him just being a groom along for the ride. But it was more than that. He skipped meetings. He gave vague reasons. He seemed, at certain moments, like a man completing an obligation rather than planning a celebration. Molly's family had deeper unease. Her brother Tim said that Addy could never look you in the eye. He was evasive. He put off bad vibes to everybody. Some of her relatives reached a point where they told Molly they wouldn't be coming to the wedding at all. Jody Lindbergh sent Molly a message not long before the wedding saying she tended to avoid weddings and funerals. It was a deflection, a way of getting out of something that felt wrong. She never imagined how dark that message would read when she looked at it again the following week. Never would have thought, Lindbergh said, that I would have been going to her funeral that next week instead of her wedding. On April 25, 2018, 2 days before Molly Watson's body was found, she and James Addy walked into the Randolph County Recorder's office to apply for their marriage license. This was it. The final official step. The government paperwork that would make everything real. The Recorder of Deeds, Mark Price, sat across from them and went through his standard questions. It was routine work. He did it all the time. But when he got to the part about prior marriages, standard information, legally required, something shifted in James Addy's face. Price asked if he had been married before and how it ended. He was just like, "Why do you need to know that?" Mark Price, Randolph County Recorder of Deeds Price, described him as perturbed, not nervous, not embarrassed, irritated, like the question was an invasion rather than a form. Addy told Price that he had been married, that his ex-wife was named Melanie, that they had divorced, and that she had later died in a car accident after being taken off life support. He signed the license. Molly signed beside him, and they walked out with the document that was supposed to begin the rest of their lives together. What investigators would later discover is that the day before Molly was killed, April 26, 2018, she had been searching her phone for Melanie Addy's obituary. She had been looking for proof, evidence. The death notice of the woman James had told her about, the woman who had been in the accident, the woman who had died. She was fact-checking her fiancé one day before her murder. She found nothing. Because Melanie Addy was not dead. Melanie Addy was alive, sitting in her house, waiting for her husband to come home. What Molly Watson did with that realization, whether she confronted James, whether she called him, whether she demanded an explanation, is not recorded. But something happened between April 26 and the night of April 27. Something that ended on a gravel road in Monroe County with a gun pressed to the back of her head. Marriage license signed. Molly and James visit the county recorder's office. Addy becomes irritated when asked about prior marriages. He repeats his story about Melanie being dead. Molly searches for Melanie's obituary. Forensic phone records later show she was trying to find proof that her fiancé's ex-wife was actually dead. She finds nothing. Addy drops off wedding decorations. He visits the venue with centerpieces. When asked if he's excited, he says Molly has been driving him crazy. Addy leaves the house. He tells Melanie he is going to a friend's. Melanie goes to bed, wakes at 2 a.m. to find him snoring beside her. Molly Watson is murdered. Glenn McSparren finds her body on a rural gravel road. She has been shot once in the back of the head. Her engagement ring is still on her finger. Police arrive at Melanica's door. Officers inform her that her husband has been arrested in connection with the murder of his fiancée. This is how Melanie Addy learns about the 7-year affair. The night Molly Watson was killed, Melanie Addy went to bed like she always did, probably a little frustrated that her husband had gone out again without much explanation. James came home at some point while she slept, and she woke at 2 in the morning to find him snoring beside her. She got up, went to the couch, the way she always did when his snoring kept her awake. That was her ordinary life. About 30 minutes later, she noticed lights outside, police lights. Officers were at her door, and what they told her that night cracked open a world she had not known existed. Her husband had been arrested. He had a fiancée, a woman named Molly Watson. They had been together for 7 years. They were supposed to be married in 2 days, and Molly Watson had just been murdered. It was just mind-boggling. It made no sense at all. It didn't seem right. This was not my life. Melanie Addy's world unraveled from that moment forward. She filed for divorce within weeks of James's arrest. She went through their home, looking for evidence of the life he had been hiding. In the loft above their garage, tucked away in a storage area almost nobody ever went into, she found photos of James and Molly together at Disney World in Florida. The trip he had told her was for work. She thought about all the late arrivals home, all the arguments that went nowhere because he refused to explain, all the times she had assumed the best about a man who was doing something she could never have imagined. "I guess because I wasn't supposed to see it," she said. She went to visit him in jail. About a week after his arrest, she needed to see him. He told her he was sorry for the affair. He told her he was not the killer. She looked at the man she had built her entire adult life beside and felt nothing but the knowledge that she no longer wanted him anywhere near her. "I looked at him as someone I didn't want back," she said. When prosecutors needed a witness at trial, they called Melanie Addy to the stand. She testified against the man she had been married to for 23 years. She said it was just horrible, that she didn't want to be there and didn't want to be in the position of hurting him. But she went, and she told the truth she'd had no idea was even hers to tell. When James Addy's case went to trial, prosecutors laid out a theory that was as simple as it was devastating. James Addy could not marry Molly Watson. Not really. He was still legally married to Melanie. And after 7 years of a double life, after a wedding that had been planned, invitations sent, centerpieces dropped off, the moment of reckoning was finally here. Molly had started looking for Melanie's obituary. She had found nothing. She knew something was wrong, and James Addy, prosecutors argued, could not let her find out the truth, because if she did, everything collapsed. The marriage was impossible. The lie was exposed. The entire architecture of his second life came down at once. The solution he chose was a gravel road and a gun. Melanie Addy, when asked what she made of it, was not surprised. She had lived with him. She understood how his mind worked. He was a pretty selfish person. He could be controlling and intimidating. It could be challenging. It just seemed like something he would do to fix a problem. The word fix carries enormous weight in that sentence. Not rage, not grief, not panic. Fix, like Molly Watson, was a problem in a ledger. Like the solution was administrative rather than monstrous. That single word, from the woman who knew him best, says more about James Addy than almost anything else in this story. At trial, the forensic evidence told its own story. Addy did not take the stand in his own defense. His attorney presented his case, and the jury listened, and they came back with their verdict: guilty. First-degree murder. Armed criminal action. In July 2021, James Addy was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 10 years. Guilty on all counts, James Addy was convicted of first-degree murder and armed criminal action for the killing of Molly Watson. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 10 years. At sentencing, the judge gave Addy the chance to speak. He did not apologize to Molly's family. He did not confess. Instead, he read a love letter addressed to Molly Watson, the woman he had been convicted of killing. He wept while he read it. He then asked for a new trial, claiming his defense attorney had failed him, had not presented the evidence he needed, had left him defenseless against charges he insisted he did not earn. "There is no way that I could have done this crime," he told the court. "The only one I hold at fault in this entire process is my attorney, because he had the means and he had the ability to present my case, and he failed to do it whenever I asked him." He is currently appealing his conviction. He maintains his innocence. The wedding venue was decorated. The centerpieces that James Addy had dropped off that afternoon were set up on tables that would never seat a wedding party. 2 wedding dresses hung in Molly's closet. A marriage license with 2 signatures sat in a car on a dark county road, beside the body of a woman who had believed every word of a lie that lasted 7 years. The people who loved Molly Watson carry that particular weight. The knowledge that the bad feelings so many of them had turned out to be exactly right. Her brother Tim knew something was wrong with James Addy from the beginning. He said it plainly. Before any of this happened, he put off bad vibes to everybody. But Molly was in love, and love has a way of muffling the alarms that other people can hear clearly. Amber Brady, the woman whose relationship with Molly ended the night she knocked on that motel room door, has had to live with her own version of this loss. The story of her and Molly was complicated, imperfect, and ended badly. None of that makes grief simple. And then there is Melanie Addy, the woman at the center of everything who knew nothing at all. She lost her marriage, her sense of her own life, her trust in her own perception. She looked back on 23 years and found them rewritten. She had to figure out what was real and what James had constructed for his own convenience. She testified at trial. She did the hard thing, and she walked away from a man she had believed she knew, into a life she had to build again from scratch. James Addy sits in a Missouri prison today. He has filed appeals. He writes love letters to a woman he is convicted of murdering. He says he was failed by his lawyer. He says he is innocent. Molly Watson's family knows what they believe. Glenn McSparron knows what he saw. The jury heard the evidence and made their choice. The sentence is life without parole. Molly never got to wear either of her wedding dresses. She never got to see the Beauty and the Beast centerpieces set on the tables just the way she'd imagined. She never got to walk down the aisle on a Sunday morning in April into what she thought was the beginning of the life she'd always wanted. She got a gravel road instead, a dark creek, a single shot, and a man who decided that a problem is easier to eliminate than to explain.